BTW, Building Relationships Through Mentoring and Networking. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. This week, my guest is Kevin Hankins, Vice President of Maintenance at Penrose. In this episode, Kevin and I discuss his journey into the multifamily industry, as well as the challenges of vendor procurement. We also talk about the importance of networking and building relationships. Later in our conversation, we talk about the importance of mentoring and how mentoring is so important, not just for our current team members, but even those in the industry that we might not always work with at our own organizations. At the end of the day, our conversation is about people, how we treat them, how they respond, and how we can all be better. So join me and Kevin as we go beyond the work. Welcome to Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. My name is Chris Caramanica. As a 15-plus year veteran in the apartment industry, I have stories to tell, a desire to hear and tell others' stories. As a multiple committee member for NAA, a CAMT advisory board member and a CAMT holder, and a national presenter and educator, I have met and worked with so many great people in our industry at all different levels. This is not going to be a how-to podcast. This is going to be a how did podcast. We are going to explore the how did tales in multifamily maintenance. How did we do it? How did we learn from it? How did we grow? How did we decide not to do it again? Join me as we go beyond the work. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today on Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited as well.
So, Kevin, you're Vice President of Maintenance at Penrose, and you and I have had the conversation before. The vice president title of maintenance is not something that we see very much in the industry. It is growing, thankfully, within many organizations. But for myself and the audience, how did you even get into the multifamily apartment industry? How did you even get into the business?
Yeah, I think I fell into it. I think I was 19 and my lease was up on my first apartment. And I was driving down the road and I pulled into an apartment complex and said, hey, I work for a temporary company. Can I still lease an apartment here? And, will I still qualify? And she said, are you looking for a job, a full-time job? I said, I am. She said, we have a groundskeeper position open you'll get 25% off of your rent. So I accepted a job for $5.50 an hour and 25% off of my rent.
I hear so many stories. I think I should rename the podcast to I Fell Into It, because that's usually how everybody's story starts. But I don't see enough, or I don't hear enough stories of current team members having the same thing, right? It's very rare do I hear a story about a property manager stopping a maintenance guy who's driving through the property and says, hey, do you want a job here? It's very challenging. Maybe it was a time that is far gone, or maybe it's something that we can think about and bring back, hopefully.
It would be nice. I always say that we as industry leaders, we have a responsibility to bring people into this industry. It's not the 90s anymore, the 80s, where you actually had to go find a job. Now there's so many jobs out there that it's such a competitive market. You're paying people. I would have never thought in 1992 that I could have made $25 or $30 an hour as a tech. So you do hire some people. Unfortunately, you pay them, $25 an hour, and they leave 6 months later for $26 an hour. So I think that the onboarding process is probably the most crucial part of retaining people. I really do. I think that it's important to understand the skill set of the person that you're hiring, and right out of the box, offer them the onboarding experience where you acknowledge that they're there, and offer them training. What are your weaknesses? You should be asking those in the interview process, and right out of the box, give them the resources they need to better themselves. And I tell people all the time, take the knowledge that we give you for yourself. We would love for you to stay with Penrose for a long time if you're a great employee and apply those skills towards us. But the bonus is that when you leave Penrose, you got something, in your arsenal to take with you. And better qualify yourself for the next position.
So if my math is right, you've been in the industry 32, 33 years?
May will be 33 years.
That's
That's right.
amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your role at Penrose.
Penrose, I have several responsibilities. I'm in charge of facilities, which we have several regional maintenance managers throughout the country that I manage. We have a contracts and procurement department that I'm responsible for. We have a risk management department that I'm responsible for. And we have a transitions department. We build most of our own product. And so once it comes out, it stays in construction for a year until it's leased up and has a permanent loan on it. And then it's turned over to operations. We call that transitions department. I'm over that department as well. So we have a director of transitions for construction, and he's a regional maintenance manager, but he does a whole lot more. He sets the properties up and gives us a good product that we can continue to manage from the beginning.
Well, it's not what I wanted to talk to you about today, but maybe offline or on a future podcast, I want to hear more about this transition manager program that you have. If we have
Sure.
time, I definitely will get back to it. But that is something that, again, it's unique. I have managed and overseen many operational changeovers from the construction department and development group over to operations. And that's something that I've never heard of before. So I think there's a couple things that I did want to cover first. So maybe we can get back to that. Let me just,
Okay.
I have notes in front of me just in case. So I'll make a quick note. But I wanted to talk to you. You did say that two of the areas that you oversee are your procurement department as well as your risk management compliance, correct?
Correct. Correct.
So I'm going to tell a quick story, and Kevin, feel free to jump in or add to it. You know, you and I were together not long ago. I think it was in September. We were down in Austin, Texas at an NAA event where we were speaking together. You sent me a text and said, "Hey, I'll meet you down at the bar." And I said, "Yeah, sounds good. I'll meet you down at the bar." Well, apparently the same vendor had invited us to come and meet with him. He basically tricked the two of us into a sales meeting. Did you interpret what happened in that moment the exact same way that I did? That he told you that I would be there, and you told him that I would be, and vice versa, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. He said, "Hey, I'm meeting Chris down at the bar in the lobby." And I thought it was, I thought I was doing you a favor by meeting your friend. I thought you were, introducing a valuable a vendor to me, a connection. Yeah, and I think he said, "Hey, I'm meeting Kevin down," and come to find out, he ended up finding the committee that was hosting the event and on the NAA website, and that's how he tricked us. He was able to obtain our number from LinkedIn and texted us. It was a great trick. He was actually a nice guy, but he also brought another vendor with him, and it was two vendors that were not invited by NAA by any means. So yeah, it was a neat trick for sure.
Yeah, I gotta say it was a neat trick. I thought you were doing me a favor. I thought I was doing you a favor. But on the bright side, we had a great conversation. We had very nice dinner. And you're right. The vendors that tricked us. It was we had a night. It was all four of us had a very nice evening. And this is what we do at these events is we network.
Yeah.
We get to meet new people. Or in our case, we got to know each other better that night, I think, from our interactions.
I did have a good time. And I think what was important for both of us, just as leaders, I think, but just as people, we both made sure that when the check came, that we all had separate checks. Because you tricked me, but you're not gonna buy me dinner and continue to call me. And they did. I think they followed up several times, and it was a part of the industry that we weren't interested in. But we did meet some nice folks in Austin, Texas, and we had a good dinner with them and had a couple of drinks, and hey, it was great.
So, that story reminded me, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you. It's one of the tales that, I have in multifamily, and it's a shared one that you and I have, right? Is these events that we go to, and we'll talk more about them, but I wanted to really talk to you about vendors, right? I experience, and as do my regional maintenance managers, my on-site teams, experience a lot of issues with vendor pools, with the ability to find the right vendor, the ability to find a vendor that's willing to do the job. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about what are some of your challenges in procurement, because it's not something that I've personally talked about anywhere before. And I know you have some experience and some challenges there. So and you're not
Sure.
alone in those challenges, by the way.
I think one thing that we are very proud of, Penrose is one of the oldest and most respected affordable housing companies in the country, really. And but the nice thing is that we stay on top of tech, and we try to make things easier for ourselves and our partners. And so one of the newer challenges we have is we just recently started a compliance software where a company, they check your background, they check your insurance and everything that we don't have time to do anymore. And there is an annual fee associated with that. And it can be a challenge on some of the smaller tertiary markets where you've got one guy, that can do it all.
The
You only have
the
a
only
few
guy in
vendors.
town with a paintbrush, basically. The only
Yep,
guy
the
in
only
town with
guy
a
in town with a
paintbrush.
paintbrush, and he doesn't want to pay that $110 to become a vendor. So you say, you know what? Just consider that in your pricing, right? And you think you're there, and then our industry is pretty standard with the amount of insurance that's required to work on properties. So now you have to overcome those challenges with chucking the truck, not being able to afford to, you know, carry the insurance that we have. And so it goes, right. We started with the tertiary markets, but even when you get to some of the larger markets, it it can become a problem because once a company finds some good solid vendors, they keep them busy. And it's hard, it's very difficult in some markets. We shared a couple, you and I share a few markets that we work in, and I'm lucky enough to have you as a friend and as a peer in the industry, to where we can exchange vendor contact information and vendor experience. I think that's really important. I have I'm mentoring someone in the apartment industry as a new regional maintenance manager in the South, that we just came into the market, and it happens to be one of his markets. And so I have another. We went to dinner and catch up as friends, and there was another resource for me. So I think that not only do we have a responsibility of bringing solid people into the industry to work for us, but we also need those vendor partners as well. And I think that we need to treat them good and maintain a solid relationship with them.
Yeah, you and I were talking recently about this. People are companies, sites are very protective of their vendors, and they're just as protective of their vendors that they're using as they're protective of their employees, right? They don't want their employees to go across the street. They definitely don't want their vendors to work across the street.
Right.
But we're all doing the same thing. We all need good, reliable vendors. And one of the nice things that's come out of my networking with folks like you and other industry peers is that ability to say, hey, listen, I got a guy, right? Everybody's got a guy. But a lot of times it's not the same guy. And if more regionals reached out to their counterparts on LinkedIn, reached out to other organizations and say, hey, listen, do you need somebody because I need somebody? You got to ask. You got to ask for something, but you also have to be willing to give up something as well, right?
Right. It's a good point. And, as a part of my 2025 strategy in my department, have basically required everyone on my team, which is there roughly 10 or 12 people on my immediate corporate team. I'm requiring them to attend at least 2 industry events this year. I do it. I've done it. It's helped me elevate myself from a groundskeeper to vice president of maintenance. I was on site for over 15 years. And I've been, in a corporate level position for about the same amount of time. And the reason I have done it is because I've circled myself around the right people, and I've circled myself around the right mentors. So I think I have a responsibility to share my good vendor partners, share their information with my peers like you. We help each other out, and there's several peers in this industry. Like you said, some people want to hold tight and they don't want to let go, but you're doing them a favor and allow them to grow as a partner when you share your good experiences with them with other people.
Yeah, I had one of my regionals send me an email actually yesterday. The timing of this conversation is very good, and said, "Hey," he sent it to me and several of my regionals, his peers in the region, and said, "Hey, I'm going to the Pennsylvania Apartment Association Expo in, I think it's in a month or so, and he said, who wants to go with me?" Right. So he wants to go. He's a little bit of an introvert. He knows that those situations make him uncomfortable. And I will tell you from personal experience, those situations make me uncomfortable as well. But he's reaching out to peers and me to say, hey, who wants to go? And I always encourage that for a lot of reasons. Those apartment association expos are usually, well-respected vendors in their markets. It's an opportunity for, yes, it's a sales pitch, but at the same time, it could be as easy as sharing a business card, right? Making a shared connection. Oh, you went to Penn State University. I went to Penn State University. It's an opportunity where you can have a relationship above and beyond your, vendor partner relationship, right? So I
Absolutely.
really encourage that. And I encourage everybody that is listening to do exactly what you're doing, Kevin, is one, challenge your team members to find networking events. And they don't always have to be expos where there's a bunch of booths and vendors. It could be something at your local affiliate. It could be, there's, in addition to NAA, there's IREM, there's NMHC. There's a lot of different organizations out there that have these types of networking events and opportunities for you to meet peers as well as possible vendor partners. How do you usually feel at those kind of things, Kevin? Because I'm there's probably some of my vendor partners listening right now that go, Chris walks right by my table, and now and I don't know why, and I'm going to explain why. But what are your feelings when you either get those emails on LinkedIn, those emails to your inbox, or even those in-person expos like I was just talking about?
Yeah, well, we go to those events to meet people, right? Not only for our own personal growth, but we need to bring good partners to our companies. And, I have been heavily involved in apartment associations in the past, and I've backed off a little bit. You know, I'm not the greatest person to accept cold calls a lot. I get so busy, and some of the cold calls I love because it's something that I need to learn about, and some of it is I don't
I don't have
I
need
don't
for your
care
product.
about the pH of the dog poop on the property, that kind of stuff. But I do think it's very important for us as leaders in the industry to attend those events and meet those people. A lot those vendors, they spend a lot of money and they take a lot of time out of their day to attend those events, to meet decision makers in this industry. And as some of my vendor partners or vendor peers that I've known for a very long time will tell you, is that it's just as important to acknowledge that groundskeeper and that maintenance technician that's attending that event. A lot of times they're required to do it, but I will be the first to tell you that as a groundskeeper, for the first 20 years I was in this business, I attended every single Atlanta Apartment Association event that there was there, especially the expos. And that's where you start to find out who the good people are, because the good salespeople will treat the groundskeeper with the same respect as he will the VP. And those are the people there's a vendor in Georgia, a very successful vendor in Georgia. I met him the first year I was in this business, and he was working out of the trunk of his car selling pool chemicals. He actually showed me, he's the guy that showed me how to work on a swimming pool. And now he's one of the most successful chemical companies in the apartment industry throughout the country. So with him showing me that respect as a groundskeeper and willing to teach me how to work on a swimming pool, he didn't have to do that. Those are the people that you want, because now he has a good friend that is in a leadership, another good friend, I should say, that's in a leadership role. And so I think that is, to answer to a long way to answer your short question, is I do think that everyone should attend those events and show those vendors as much of respect that they show us.
Yeah. And, the vendor partners, suppliers, vendors, contractors, there's a lot of different names for them, right? That's their job. Their job is to sell. They're salespeople. If you're at an expo, they're trying to sell a product or a service.
Yeah,
And
well,
but that's their job. We're there to listen. And
yeah.
whether we need it or not, that's our role. But their role is to sell us something.
Well, what's funny is you'll look at a product at that event, and you kind of just like blow it off. And then, years later, the shark bite has taken off. And you're like, nobody's never going to use a shark bite. Y'all are crazy. It reminds us of some of the old poly piping from the 80s. Nobody wants a shark bite. And now look, people are paying $7 a piece for them.
Right.
And
companies are saying you can no longer do hot work. They don't want anybody sweating pipe. So it's either shark bite or ProPress.
Right. That's right. So it's fun. I remember early on at one of those trade shows, there was a competition, and they had like a clear deadbolt there, and you could see the cylinder with the pins in it. And if you could write down the size of the pin, you won a gift.
Oh, I can.
And so back in the 80s or back in the early 90s, all maintenance guys key their own locks, right?
Yep.
And so
I did when I started 15 years ago.
The very first time I attempted, I wrote all the numbers down. Boom, I won. I think it was like a golf umbrella or something. It wasn't anything huge, but I was the guy that walked around, the $10 an hour guy that walked around that event holding that umbrella, and so now I have people all the time say, I need to call a locksmith to change this lock. And so back, I think, for one thing, I will tell you that had they had Google or YouTube when I was on site, I'd have never called a vendor. I mean, people call me all the time for tech support. I may not know the answer, but a lot of times you can Google it or YouTube it and tell them exactly how to fix it just by watching a video.
And it gets even better. I mean, you can literally plug into any AI program at this point. How do I replace a deadbolt? And it's going to give you a step-by-step instruction. Much like, Kevin, I'm sure you had them too. The little cheat sheet cards that was just A, B, C. I used to have a big belt of them when I started 15 years ago, of all the little cheat sheet cards before there was YouTube videos and before there was Google. So yeah, but I want to go back to the vendors for a second. Vendor suppliers, is that a lot of times people come and talk to me because of what's my title. They see my name badge and they see director, right? For years they see vice president, right? And I've been there with regional maintenance managers. I've been there with my technicians. I've been there, at these events with groundskeepers, and they don't always acknowledge them. The ones that do acknowledge them, I spend more time with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But to our vendor and supplier partners out there, they forget that the groundskeeper may have more of a decision-making ability than a director, a VP, or a property manager. Because who's the person with the problem that needs solving? It is the groundskeeper.
Who's the person that uses the product and
Yes.
says, "Hey, boss, I need some more of this." And okay, well, I'll get you some of X brand. No, no, if you don't mind, will you order this from this vendor because it's the best. It's the easiest stuff to use. It's
Right.
easier on me physically, and so you're right. And I think the vendors, the sponsors that are listening, there's something to be learned in that. And me,
Yeah.
again, coming up in the industry from a groundskeeper, I've worked in every single position there is in the facility side of this industry. And I tell you, like you said, the ones that shows people the most amount of respect are the ones that get more time with me. Absolutely. I agree with
Yeah.
that.
I still work with people that when I got into the business 15 years ago, and yeah, it doesn't seem that long ago, but especially Kevin, you're in the affordable housing sector like I am. 15 years is quite a long time. I've been in the affordable sector for 9 of them, so I'm ready to retire now by normal industry standards. But I still have relationships with people that I worked with 15 years ago at my first job. I still have vendors or contacts that I know if I might not have needed them in the few years, but I know if I pick up the phone, they're gonna they're gonna either A, talk me through something, or B, they're gonna actually show up to provide that proposal or make that repair. And it's not something you see very
Absolutely.
often.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of the vendors that come in, started when I did, and they've come up through the industry with me. They've come up in the ranks, and the vendor I was telling you about with the that worked out of the trunk of his car. Every time I see him at an event, I don't use him that much because in the affordable housing industry, we really don't have a lot of swimming pools out there, and so there's really not a need to use him. But when I do see him, we both shake each other's hands and say thank you. 32 years later, we still say thank you because it was building blocks. He's a part of my success, and I think I was a part of his success throughout the years too.
Yeah. And I think it's also important because we do share a lot, especially with the contractor side of the business. We have groundskeepers that make their way up to directors and vice president levels, like you and I, right? There's plenty of stories like that. But there's also plenty of stories of the apprentice plumber who ends up owning his own business, or the
Yes,
journeyman electrician who ends up owning a fire alarm company. And that's, I know a couple of people who have done that, which is why I brought that up, because they're actually very closely, electricians and fire alarm are actually more connected than most people know, if
sure,
you're not a layman like
sure.
you and I. So yeah, I think it's important to remember is that the guy that you're shadowing and watching fix a plumbing leak on your boiler may own a boiler company in 5 or 10 years when you're a maintenance supervisor or a regional, right?
Yeah,
So it's important for everybody in the industry, everybody in the business, to make those connections because you never know.
you
You
never
treat
know.
everybody with the same level of respect. You treat everybody with the same level of courtesy and just as a good human being, because that person may be a lifelong friend, like in your pool example, a lifelong colleague in this industry.
Yeah, it's and the great thing, I don't know if I told you this, but when I came out of traditional conventional apartment side of the industry into the affordable housing industry nearly 4 years ago, and I had never even been north of DC, and I accepted
I
a
remember
job
you
to where
telling me that when we were together in Austin,
yeah.
Texas, that you don't travel that much. You've never been north of DC.
Well, I've always traveled, but it's always been south of DC, right?
Right, right.
I mean, I've been traveling for years, but I accepted a job with a company, affordable housing, that I knew nothing about, part of the country that I'd never been to. And I was like, we have, over 100 properties above DC. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? What are you going to do? So, there was an IRM event right after I started. I went there. I knew one person there that I had talked to a couple weeks earlier who did some work for me. And then that one person knew everybody. I mean, he just knew everybody. He'd been in business for 30 years as well. And I circle myself around him and his group of friends, and now I have plenty of vendors. Well, I don't have plenty of vendors, but I have a lot of vendors that I can turn to and reach out to if I need to. So it's
Yeah,
just
that's
funny
another
how
part.
respect works.
That's another part of the networking in general, right? We were talking earlier about our connections in the industry. You and I were actually thrown together to present. We didn't actually know each other a year ago, even though we work in the same spaces. We work in the same we work for the same in the same market. We work on the same affordable side of the industry. In a lot of markets, your properties are pretty close to my properties, but we didn't know each other, right? I knew of Penrose, and you knew of Win Residential and Win Companies, but we didn't actually know each other until somebody was sitting in a room and said, "We need two presenters to talk on maintenance at this event in September. Who do we got?" And they said, "We got Kevin and Chris." And
Yeah,
you were one of the people in that room. I wasn't in that room, but there were
right.
people that were there that said, "Hey, we're going to do this." So that's how you and I got connected. But in that, we found out that we have like-minded experiences in the industry. We have like-minded jobs. Our roles are very similar. On top of all the other things that I mentioned with the similarities, and I think that that's why those networking events are so important. Is that you might not? I might, if I didn't have a podcast, Kevin, I'd probably see you maybe 2 or 3 times a year, right? At an industry event. But I know from those few times that we did get together and we have sat and talked that I could just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, can I need something, or I want to bounce something off of you." You reached out to me not long ago doing exactly that, right?
Yeah, it's when I think when you're in our position at our companies, the owners of our companies or the C suite, they want to they need some answers, right? And uh, what are other people doing? What are your peers doing? And it's great to be able to text you and a couple other guys. You're with a fairly large company, and you find a couple guys with a large company and a couple guys with smaller companies. Hey, what are you doing? And you were so gracious enough to tell me. Of course, you didn't send me your policy, but you were able to give me a 50,000 foot look at it, and I appreciate that because I was able to respond to my C-suite in a very timely manner. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right, and that's exactly what we should be doing.
So, on that note, I want to transfer over. You've mentioned mentoring a few times, and did you have a mentor? And I know the answer to the question. Did you? But I want to ask it anyway. Did you have a mentor or several mentors in the business, and really, what did they do for you? And yeah, let's start there. Did you have
Sure.
mentors as you grew up in the
I
business, and what did they do for you?
Well, I've had mentors in the business who have taught me. Something that I say a lot when people are promoted is that you go from a groundskeeper to a maintenance tech. You've never been a maintenance tech before. Somebody's got to show you how to do it. And the big win for me is when you go from a maintenance supervisor to a regional maintenance supervisor. You've never been one before, and you may have been a maintenance supervisor for 15 years, and it's your way or the highway, but you don't know how to be a regional. So it's important for me in my position to show you the management side of things. You're very skilled on site, but you may not know proper email etiquette. You may not know how to use your calendar. You may not know that you need a notebook when you meet the C suite or a sports coat or some event, so it's really important. And sadly, in some cases, I've embarrassed myself into learning that, so I've had mentors outside of the apartment industry that are, I had a friend that was an electrician, and when I was 20 years old, he let me go rough houses with him on the side, trim houses. He taught me electrical. I had a friend that was a AC guy. He took me to install units and showed me how to sweat and things like that. So that's why I say vendor partners are just as important. These guys were my friends, my personal friends who were willing to help me. But as I elevated myself through, I found peers in the industry, people that maybe I worked with who took another job that elevated in their role and had a little more experience than I did. We worked on site together, but now he's a regional maintenance supervisor. Hey, tell me how I get there. People ask me that all the time. How do I elevate myself? What do I do? And I don't know if I told you this, but my three brothers were all maintenance people as well.
No, I didn't know
And
that.
I'm the youngest. I came in first, but they just saw how good this industry has been to me. And so they asked me the same questions. How do I become a maintenance supervisor? How do I become a regional? And I always tell them the same thing: be kind and know the line, but always say yes. It's not hard to say yes. So, and that's how you get mentors. That's how you, when people show you respect. And I've had people that were, when I was a maintenance supervisor, who was techs, who become regionals before I did, but I showed them enough respect where they would teach me the ropes. So
Yeah.
I don't think that I can name some mentors that I think were very important to me, especially when it comes to the capital market, capital projects. I was a capital projects manager for many years, between my regional maintenance manager role and my VP role. And I was able to meet peers in the industry who had contacts. It's all about, we keep saying, we keep talking about vendors, we keep talking about contacts, but you know, if you work with a paint and siding guy for a couple of years, and you're working with them, he's going to introduce you to the CapEx manager for wind companies. And then, hey, what did you do for, but just like you and I do from time to time, hey, what do you do for this? What do you do for, hey, do you have a scope for this? Scope is a big one. Scope is a
Huge,
huge one.
huge one.
Huge. Because the first time you paint a project and a year and a half later the paint's peeling, you learn really quick.
That you need a better scope the next time.
You need a better scope, and you need those Sherwin-Williams specifications, and you need Sherwin-Williams on your job. But that's why it's so important. The first time you lose 100 grand or 30 grand for a company, you learn real quick. You need mentors in this business, so it's really important to ask the questions, because the only stupid question is the one not asked.
Yeah, I've always felt I've done a good job mentoring my team, right? My direct reports, my regionals. I've had the opportunity of mentoring some folks outside of the organization. Much like you, I had somebody reach out to me at a networking event and say, "Hey, I have a new at an NAA event," and said, "Hey, I have this new director of facilities, and he's coming up from a regional, and I don't know what to tell him. I don't. It was a new role. He's the only one, right? So, I agreed, and I don't know this gentleman at all, but I had the pleasure of spending 45 minutes with him, learning about his experiences, asking him what are some of his challenges and areas that he wants to see improve, and then I gave him some of my insight. And hopefully we can get together, once a month, whatever frequency is good for him, because I want it to be mentee driven, and I don't want to be hounding somebody I don't want to be
Yeah.
helping somebody that may not want the help or feel like they don't need it. Right. And that's the other part of a mentor relationship.
No,
But
no,
your story, go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say, I'm mentoring someone now outside of Penrose, and again, it was the same thing. As we said at the start of this show, is our positions aren't with every company.
Yeah.
They're just not. And this guy came up to a regional maintenance manager. This company had never had a regional maintenance manager, so
Yeah.
I said, "Can you mentor him?" So I spend an hour a month on a Teams call with him, and I just answer whatever questions he wants. The first couple of times, like you say, who's this guy? What is he doing? But then after we started to know each other and learn each other, I think he really respects me, in my opinion now. And from what I understand, he's doing great with his industry. You can share job descriptions with people, generic job descriptions you can share with people, nothing that's, protected, but,
Yeah.
and scopes of work. I think I've written scopes of work in the past where I've seen bounce around the country and come back to me before, you know,
You're like, I wrote
I
this
think
10 years ago.
I did. It's like crazy. What's going on here? But I think it's important to be able to do that. That things aren't licensed or privileged within your company. I think you can share some things, just as we people share with me as well. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
mentorship is a big thing.
And for, the lead, for anybody that's listening and either listening or watching, I recently had a story that I don't think that a lot of people think about. I had one of my regionals come to me recently and said, before you promoted me to be a regional, you spent a lot of time with me. We had one-on-one meetings every week, and I was just a senior super. Why did you do that? And I said, well, because I knew that you had what it takes to be a regional maintenance manager, and I had plans. I had already had plans that in the future, whether that was 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, that I was going to promote you to be a regional maintenance manager. And what he said next really hit me pretty hard. And he said, well, why aren't you doing that for the other seniors in the region right now?
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
it really
It's
hit
deep.
me. And why aren't you doing that for the other senior supers in our senior maintenance supervisors in our region? The only answer I had was there's no reason.
Yeah.
My
You
only
know,
my only answer was, pardon, I don't have a bleep button, but I guess I'm being an asshole, right? I chose you over the other four to give them mentorship.
well, I think you are drawn to those people. I don't think you're being. I don't think you are when you just people are drawn to you, right? I was with my last company. I was with them for several years as a VP of maintenance and as a capex manager, and I traveled the country. And I remember meeting this gentleman in Louisiana. He was brand new to the industry. I liked him. He wanted to learn. He didn't have tools. He didn't have a lot of things, and he had a regional maintenance manager. I was the VP of maintenance, but I was drawn to him, and I got him, a Klein tool bag full of tools because he did something that I said, wow, this guy, he wants to learn. He's great, and so I mentored him on a personal level, not on a professional level. This, like you
There is
said,
a
you're drawn to
difference.
people.
Yeah.
Some people, when you get our age, we have adult children, and this guy reminded me of a son. Well, it's been about 4 years, a little over 4 years since I left that organization, and I want to tell you, a couple of months ago, he sends me a message on Facebook, and he's actually moved to Georgia, and he said, "I just want to let you know that through your motivation and your mentorship, I am now a regional maintenance manager in Atlanta, Georgia. And I just want to say thank you for believing in me and motivating me to want to learn more." And so that's why I said he doesn't work for Penrose. He doesn't work for me. And like I told him when I was with that company, it's the whether you keep your knowledge and stay here or you go down the road. I wish for your success. And the best reward for me is for him to send me an email and says, "Hey, thank you."
That's it.
He
Yeah.
he acknowledged me. He made me feel like, okay, well, I am doing something good. So I think when people want to learn from you, and just like him, he came and asked me a question, so I mentored him. So I wouldn't feel bad if those other three senior maintenance supervisors were to come to you and said, "Hey, Chris, will you spend a little extra time with me? I know you as a person. I know that you would say yes, I would do that."
But
And
I'm going to do you one better to close out the story. So after I pulled the arrow out of my heart, because that's where I felt that comment of,
yeah,
well, why aren't you doing this for the other senior supers? What I did was I started, I just set up a call just for them, where I'm going to give them an open door policy, and I am going to mentor them as much or as little as they want. So it's an open door, and it is okay. We're going to have a set meeting cadence of every quarter. You're going to get FaceTime, check in, and we're going to talk about challenges of your job, challenges at your sites, and where you want to go. And if they want to have an interim meeting other than every other quarter. Then I put it back on them as the mentee to either A, set up a call with me, or B, just pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And I want, the reason that I really gave that time to this regional manager who I promoted was because I had a role. But I think, Kevin, in your story, it's a perfect example is just because I don't have a role doesn't mean somebody else doesn't have one. And I'm doing a disservice to my team members as well as the industry by not developing the next level of leaders. So, like I said, after I pulled the arrow out of my heart because it hurt to hear that truth,
Yeah.
right? That, I, subconsciously was picking and choosing who I wanted to mentor. I wasn't giving others an equal opportunity to train with me or, develop themselves. Now, yes, it's on them just as much, to your point, to reach out if that's what they want. But as a leader, I can be proactive as well,
You
allowing
can.
them.
You can, and we onboard. We have an onboarding session for every maintenance person that we hire, and what we do is per market, the regional maintenance manager will grab a group of people who've been hired over the last few weeks, and they'll grab a couple of veterans in the market, and they'll come to one room, and he'll onboard them, he'll talk to them, and then I go on a Teams call with them, or if I'm in town, I'll be present, and I make sure they have my phone number, Chris, before I hang up. Every single maintenance person at Penrose has my cell phone number, and they're encouraged to call me and talk to me. I tell them, you can call me and ask me questions. You can call me and lie to me about the fish that you caught this weekend, whatever you need to do. A lot of them take advantage of that. To
That's
your point,
great.
it's like, it's up to you, really. Do you want me to mentor you, or do you want me to be your friend even? So a lot of them, I can tell you, one of those guys I just promoted. I met him in person at a meeting last year. I gave him my phone number. He kept in touch, and I thought that he was a great guy, and he was promoted to a senior maintenance supervisor role. So, like, I agree with you. You need to get out there, and you do need to meet with them, and you need to make them comfortable. Not just you, but all of us. We need to go out there and make our team members, whether it's a groundskeeper or whomever. Every time I meet a maintenance person on site, I give them my business card with my cell phone number on it, whether they already have it or not. Call me, call me, and I think that's how you retain people.
Yeah, and that's how you become a good servant leader when your people feel that comfortable to reach out to you, to text you that picture of the fish that they caught, or the sunset when they were the sunset that they are seeing when they're on vacation, and to share that. But it,
And
it it comes back to being open and being able to network and being open with your team members, with your vendor suppliers, with even your residents. But we'll talk about that another day.
yeah,
I think that's really important.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And the other part of that too is those people that do call me and talk to me, whether it's about the fish they caught, or sometimes I'll call them and say, "Hey, have you ran across this before?" Some of these guys, I've been off site for many years. Some of these guys can put me to shame with the knowledge that they have, and but I'll call those guys, and those are the first guys. If you need somebody in another state to help you with an Inspire inspection, if you call that guy and say, "Can you do me a favor?" Without question, they're going to go for you. That's how I build relationships. Again, I circle myself around good people. Even when you start in a new market up above DC, you start with a new affordable housing industry that you have no business in because you don't know anything about it. You circle yourself around good partners, but also around good people on your team. I got maintenance supervisors that have been with us for 20 years plus, and they can tell me more about Penrose and Inspire inspections, and they can turn me on to vendors that I need, and that's the people that I want in my life.
So, Kevin, that's there's no better point to end our time together today. On that note, I think it was really good to spend some time with you today, both for myself and our audience, to hear about the importance of networking as well as mentorship. And they are very intertwined. Networking is,
Yes.
mentorship and networking could, in some instances, are almost synonymous. And I think that's really important. You had some great examples of networking mentors,
Yes.
which I think is pretty amazing. So, Kevin, is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we say goodbye today?
I just want to thank you for what you're doing. These podcasts are important. I've mentioned several times we have a responsibility of leaders to bring people into the industry and bring our industry closer together. And for you to have something like this to where people can jump on and listen to it, or I think is amazing. I think for you to take time out of your day and for Wynn to allow you to do that, to attend events with the NAA and to do things like this within the industry, that says so much about Wynn on its own. I know you work for a great company. And so thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. And I'm always here for you if you ever need anything.
Well, Kevin, you will definitely be back as a guest because, like I said, we still have to talk about this transitional manager for construction and development. I made sure I took my note. But maybe we, in a future episode, we can talk about some of the challenges of new construction and development and how that transitional manager falls into play. I think that would be a great topic. But Kevin, thank you again. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I'm so glad my audience was able to be part of this conversation today. Thank you all for joining another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance, powered by the Multifamily Media Network. And we'll see you next time. Everybody's got a tale to tell. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for this episode. No matter how long you've been in our industry or what position you have at your company or your community, everyone has a maintenance story to tell. Go to www.multifamilymedianetwork.com and leave me a voice message or share your information and we can tell your tale together on a future episode. Please check out our sponsors and like, subscribe, and follow to this podcast or video, and join the Multifamily Media News Network newsletter for upcoming shows and blogs from me and the other great hosts on our network. Our stories all connect us. See you for the next chapter.